So the goal of this video is going to be to go item by item into these new changes, explain the challenges they're going to present, and possibly what kind of implications they'll have on your project or throughout the city of San Diego, and ultimately provide my opinion and maybe a solution for each of these items. So let's get started. Item number 1 here is called the ADU home minimum and maximum size. And you probably already know, but in the city of San Diego, we're limited to ADUs at 1,200 square feet. But there are exceptions to this. And this document right here clarifies those exceptions. So if you have a home that's 4,000 square feet and you wanted to split it into a duplex without adding any more square feet, this document here states that you can make a 2,000 square foot ADU and a 2,000 square foot dwelling unit, provided that the ADU is being made out of existing square footage. Another scenario where you could implement this to end up with an ADU more than 1,200 square feet would be if you had an unconditioned space like a garage. So if you had a 2,500 square foot garage, for example, you could now convert that 2,500 square foot garage into a 2,500 square foot ADU. And it's crystal clear here in the code, you're now allowed to do this. This was something that was in the code before. It just wasn't as explicitly stated as it is right now. So this basically clarifies what we already knew. But hopefully this will help expedite the plan check process, because sometimes we run into challenges with plan check where the reviewer may not understand the ADU code as well as we do. So what kind of implications would this have in the city of San Diego? Well, I think this could potentially add some more value for properties with large garages. Garage conversion is generally your lowest cost ADU. So in that sense, it could be a net win for adding more housing throughout the city. There could be some challenges with converting garages, of course. You never know the condition of the garage, but if you have a garage in a good condition, then I think this is a win. Item number 2 here is called ADU and JADU zoning. And this one's pretty simple to understand. It basically clarifies that if you're in an agricultural zone, you can still permit an ADU or a JADU. So how would this affect the city of San Diego? Well, I suppose if you're in the rare scenario where you live in an agricultural zone, well, now you have the ability to build an ADU or a JDU. Aside from that, maybe this helps with plan check, just getting us on the same page as a plan reviewer. But other than that, this one's pretty straightforward. If you're in this agricultural zone, which by the way, I've never met a client who lives in an agricultural zone, but if you live in an agricultural zone, you can now do an ADU in your project. Item number 3 from the report to the Planning Commission is about fire sprinkler requirements. And this is another one that just serves to clarify the code that was already existing. But basically this states that an ADU shall not trigger the requirement for fire sprinklers if the existing dwelling unit does not have fire sprinklers. So let me repeat that so it's super clear. If your existing home does not have fire sprinklers, your ADU does not have to have fire sprinklers. Now there are exceptions for this that are not listed here, and that would be if you're combining 3 ADUs into one structure, that's going to become an R2 occupancy project, and that's going to trigger fire sprinklers. But if you're just doing 1 or 2 ADUs, or if you're keeping all your ADUs detached, well, you're not going to trigger fire sprinklers. The implication on San Diego, I would say, in the wake of the Los Angeles wildfires, fire sprinklers are generally probably a good idea. But if you're just adding one home, the state's goal here is to keep these things as low cost as possible. And that's why you're seeing the city of San Diego clarify this to make sure that people are aware they do not have to install fire sprinklers. It is an option if you do want to install fire sprinklers. It probably adds about $3,000 of cost to your project. It may have effects on your home insurance policy as well. But in general, you will not be required to have fire sprinklers in your ADU. Item number 4, converted ADU and JADU homes within the coastal overlay zone. So this states that an ADU outside of the coastal zone or an ADU or JADU within the coastal zone but created from an existing dwelling unit should receive a ministerial process per state law. This means you're going to get the easy permit process as long as you fall into one of those 2 criteria. Let me repeat them. You're either outside of the coastal zone completely, or you're inside of the coastal zone, but you're building this ADU or JADU within the existing walls of an existing dwelling unit. This is going to be a process 1 ministerial permit, as simple as you can get within the city of San Diego. Still requires 6 to 8 months and a lot of complication, but as simple as you can get within the city of San Diego. This also clarifies that you cannot make an ADU within an existing structure if that existing structure does not conform to the wetland regulations, the sensitive coastal bluff regulations, the coastal beach regulations, or the supplemental regulations of the coastal overlay zone. So those are 4 criteria that are going to give you problems if you're in the coastal zone trying to do an ADU that's not within the existing structure. Item 5, ADU home density bonus evacuation routes. I think this is a good one. I think this is one of the better changes in this entire document, and I think this is also a direct correlation of how fire safety is going to be implemented in the city of San Diego while we're trying to add density as a result of what happened in Los Angeles. So what this change is proposing here is that if your project is located in a high fire hazard zone or a very high fire hazard severity zone, you're going to need at least 2 evacuation routes from that site before you would qualify for the ADU bonus program. So this is basically going to disqualify any lot that's on a dead end or a cul-de-sac because you would only have 1 evacuation route. And I think that makes a lot of sense, especially since some of these projects really took advantage of the program, adding 30 units in a cul-de-sac. So this is one I would agree with. I think this is ultimately going to improve the fire safety of the city of San Diego, and I don't think there's too many people out there that would oppose this change. Item number 6, number of permitted ADU and JADU homes with an existing or proposed single dwelling unit. This one is interesting. Ever wonder how you can get as many units as possible on a single family zone lot? Well, I think this clarifies it for you. In fact, it says right here that this item clarifies that a lot with an existing or proposed single dwelling unit can have 1 JADU, 1 converted ADU, and 1 detached ADU. So there's a way to get 4 units on a single family home lot. So what are the implications throughout San Diego if this makes it into the ADU code? Well, for one, I think you could throw out the JADU because that's not technically a unit, but we could basically have 3 units, 2 ADUs, 1 dwelling unit on all single family zone lots. The single family zone lots are currently a sensitive issue. People purchase these single family zone lots expecting them to have 1 home on them, but with the ADU regulations, as you know, you can now put more than 1 unit on single family home lots. There's also kind of a meta going around of whether single family home lots should be legal or not. I think every state has single family zone lots, but now throughout the entirety of California, you can put 2 ADUs on any single family zone lot. So if you own a single family zone lot, this could be an opportunity. If you live next door to a single family zone lot and you don't like ADUs, you may not like this change. Item 7, tree requirements. So the city of San Diego had some very specific tree requirements. If you were building a certain amount of ADUs, you trigger a certain amount of trees to be on your lot. Now this is different than the climate action plan, which triggers trees on the right-of-way, which oftentimes requires a right-of-way permit, inflating the cost of a tree from about $500 to about $5,000. But that's a whole nother story. This is specifically relating to trees on your lot that are triggered by the number of ADUs and the square footage of your lot. So it turns out that the state came back and they said these trees are an obstruction to ADUs, and the city of San Diego cannot require trees to be planted solely based on the permit of an ADU. So what we're expecting is for the city of San Diego to eliminate all site tree requirements based on an ADU. Now, it does state here that they're going to be looking for other ways to get more trees, but we don't know what that is yet. So as of now, if this passes the way it's written here, you will no longer be required to add trees to support your ADU projects. Item number 8, number of permitted ADU homes with an existing or proposed multiple dwelling unit structure. This is the most confusing part of this entire report, and I really hope they clarify this before it makes it into the municipal code. But this one here can also offer the biggest challenges to your ADU projects if you're in the RM zone. So here it says up to 2 detached ADU homes on a lot with a proposed multiple dwelling unit structure and up to 8 detached ADU homes on a lot with an existing multiple dwelling unit structure. It allows the creation of ADU homes within non-livable space of the existing structure up to 25% of the total number of existing dwelling units with a minimum of 1 ADU home. Now that's a mouthful, but they've given us some bullet points here. So let me read these bullet points and then we'll dissect what this means. So number 1, lots with a proposed multiple dwelling unit structure allows the development of up to 2 detached ADU homes. On lots with an existing multiple dwelling unit structure, allows for the development of up to 8 detached ADU homes. It also permits the creation of ADU homes within non-livable spaces, such as storage rooms or garages, with the number of ADU homes not exceeding 25% of the total number of existing units and a minimum of 1 ADU home required. And lastly, number 3 here, it says it ensures the combined total of detached ADU homes and ADU homes within non-livable space does not exceed the number of existing multiple dwelling units in the structure. Okay, so you see why I'm hoping this would be clarified before it makes it into the code. And we have over here the actual strike-through code, and it's not any more clear. There's a couple reasons this is going to have major cost implications in your project. So let's take the first example. On lots with a proposed multiple dwelling unit structure, it allows the development of up to 2 detached ADU homes. So if you're in a single family zone and you have a pre-conforming multiple dwelling unit structure, well, you can build 2 detached ADUs. That's already part of the code. It's just kind of hidden deep in there. So this kind of clarifies that, but there's more confusion here, particularly in the definition of multiple dwelling unit structure. So I've been told that if you had 2 detached single family homes, you would count that as a multiple dwelling unit structure. But structure is a defined term in the municipal code, which states that everything is basically connected. So it doesn't meet the definition of the municipal code, which makes things very confusing. Now, the reason this is going to have major cost implications, particularly in some of the lower income neighborhoods like Southeast San Diego, where you have smaller lots, multifamily zoning, and oftentimes a single family home on an RM multifamily zoned lot, is because you now will not be able to develop ADUs until you develop the second dwelling unit. And the second dwelling unit is going to come with impact fees. It's going to come with twice the water and sewer fee. It's going to require solar panels, and it's going to require fire sprinklers. If you total all of those up, you're probably looking at about $30,000 worth of costs, most of which are just fees that you're going to pay to the city. And unfortunately, like I said, this is really going to affect Southeast San Diego worse than a lot of other neighborhoods. Now, the interesting thing here, and which is maybe a great opportunity, is you could actually submit your project before these codes take effect if you start today and bypass these. So I have several projects where we're looking to do this because it's always more cost effective to build the ADU before the dwelling unit, but this code seems to be requiring you to build the dwelling unit first before the ADU. For all effects and purposes, the ADU and the dwelling unit are the same thing as long as they're under 1,200 square feet. So I wonder really what is the goal here? It seems like it just comes down to the fees. Now, the second part of this could provide a great opportunity if your lot is large enough. So if you have an existing multiple dwelling unit structure, which the definition is still kind of a little hazy right now, but maybe you could develop 8 ADUs behind that structure. And that would be a great opportunity because you don't necessarily have to use the ADU bonus program to do that, according to this. So item number 8 is one we're going to be tracking really closely. I hope they clarify this before it makes it into the municipal code. And I really hope they do away with that first part because I think that's going to create a lot of cost obstruction to these projects. And 2025 is probably not the time to add more fees if you're looking to build more housing in San Diego. So we'll keep you posted as to how this falls into place in the code, but this is definitely one to keep an eye out for. Item number 9, floor area ratio maximums. Now, I'm not sure if I'm reading this one correctly, but if I am, this is very interesting. So here it says that item number 9 specifies that an ADU and JADU home permitted under state law are not subject to the floor area ratio requirements of the underlying base zone. However, these ADUs and JADU homes remain subject to applicable setback and height limits. The reason this is interesting is because that would basically allow you to build a 1,200 square foot ADU or possibly 2 1,200 square foot ADUs on a lot where you have already exceeded the floor area ratio. This would grow the existing code that allows you to go 800 square feet past the existing floor area ratio with one 800 square foot ADU. Here it does not specify 800 square feet, so in theory you could build two 1200 square foot ADUs because those are the ones allowed under the state code if you have a multifamily zoned lot, or actually I suppose even in a single family zone lot, irregardless of your square footage, irregardless of your FAR. So what kind of implications would this have throughout the city of San Diego? Well, I think you're going to get a lot of people in the single family zones a little frustrated with this because the whole goal of the single family zoning is to keep the density down and to keep the scale down. However, it does state here that you cannot break past the base zone setbacks and you cannot break through the height limit. Actually, it says the applicable setbacks, which are reduced for ADUs. So I feel like this is one that in the line of thinking of the ADU bonus program, the same people mad at the ADU bonus program would probably be a little frustrated with this one. But if you own a lot where you've exceeded your floor area ratio, this actually could be a great opportunity for you. Items 10 and 11. I'm going to cover both of these because they're both related to setbacks. So item 10 says side yard setbacks for ADU structures. And this clarifies that an ADU structure is allowed in a street side yard with a setback of 4 feet. This is really important because if you have a corner lot, initially you were able to have a 4-foot interior side setback and a 4-foot rear setback for 2-story ADUs or ADUs over 16 feet. And then we were able to build the ADU into the front yard setback if it was 800 square feet or less. But now we're also allowed to build the ADU into the street side setback. So this applies to corner lots. And this actually makes corner lots a lot more developable, particularly from the ADU perspective. Now, the interesting thing here is it does not seem to allow for a 0 lot line condition if you're under 16 feet or 1 story, which you can do in the side or rear setback. So it seems like the 4-foot setback is going to be required irregardless of the height of the ADU or the amount of stories of the ADU. Now, item 11, fire safety setbacks, basically does the exact opposite. And it states if you're in the high fire or very high fire severity zone, then you're going to have a requirement of a 5-foot interior and rear yard setback. So the first item, number 10, reduces the street side setback for corner lots, and item 11 increases the setback for interior side and rear setbacks. So item 11, and I think a lot of the fire safety things you're going to see here are probably in direct response to the fires that we had in Los Angeles. And in hindsight, I think these are probably pretty sound regulations. What kind of implications does this have on San Diego? Well, the fire safety setbacks probably adds to the greater fire safety of the city, and the side yard setback reduction could result in structures being a little bit closer to the sidewalk than we previously experienced. In some neighborhoods, the street side yard setback is already 5 feet, so this would only be a 1-foot encroachment beyond that. But in other neighborhoods, you could have a 10-foot street side yard setback. So these ADUs that would be built in that area are really going to stand out. Item 12, replacement parking. So this is another one that just kind of clarifies what we already expected. Anytime the city can offer more clarification to the code, that's greatly appreciated. We don't want to be submitting projects where we have one understanding of the code and the people who are reviewing our plans have a completely different understanding of the code. Item number 12, replacement parking, basically states this proposed amendment adds uncovered parking spaces to the list of parking types that do not require replacement. This is in addition to garages or carports. Basically, if you're proposing an ADU in an area where there was required parking, like a garage, for example, or a carport, you do not have to replace that parking on the site. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't replace the parking. It's always good if you could have off-street parking on your site. But this just clarifies that even if those off-street parking spaces are just in a driveway, not covered by a parking structure, you do not have to replace them. So thanks for the clarification here. Item 13, JADU homeowner occupancy requirement exemption. This is getting a little technical here, but what this item says, it exempts government agencies, land trusts, and housing organizations from the owner occupancy requirement for JADU homes. Now, I think the only scenario I've run into where this would become applicable would be if you have the home in a trust. I'm assuming the way this will work out is that if your home is in a trust, there may be no owner occupancy requirement for you to live in that home when you build the JADU. We'll have to wait to see how this actually comes down in the code, but that's what we're expecting. Okay, now we're going to skip from item 13 to the next listed item, which is actually item 23, ADU home separate sale or conveyance. Now, a lot of people have been waiting to be able to sell their ADUs independent of their dwelling unit, and this might be your opportunity. I'm not sure how this is going to work, but it seems to draw back to Assembly Bill 1033, and it states that it's going to establish local regulations that allow for the subdivision of eligible ADU homes into individual condominium units, enabling them to be sold separately from the main dwelling. This could have major implications throughout the city of San Diego. So the goal here, if you can sell your ADUs individually, then we can put less expensive housing into the housing market. And potentially first-time home buyers would be able to buy these homes because they would be lower priced. Now, from the other perspective, from the development perspective, this also can result in higher development profits because you can develop multiple ADUs on a lot and then sell them individually, resulting in a higher net profit. So I think this is a good one. Ultimately, it's going to come down to how it's implemented. But if it's implemented in a good way, you'll see cheaper homes hit the market, which would be ADU homes essentially, and you'd see higher profits for the developers, which could incentivize more of these types of developments. I think this is a win-win. I'll hold out my opinion until I see how it's implemented, but this could be a great thing for the city of San Diego.